Hello, everyone. As you know, today is Juneteenth, when we pretty much celebrate the last freeing of the remaining slaves in our country. Um, we should always remember those who made those sacrifices and hardships to get America where it is today. So, to reflect on that, I wanted to just briefly highlight two people whom we can draw in regards to pausing on Juneteenth. So, one book I like to share is called The Governors of Louisiana. So, this is the 1972 edition. There were two editions put out before it, I'm sure many after, but this is the one I have in my home library. So, um, in this book, it discusses all the governors, and many people don't know, but Louisiana was the first state in the United States to have an African American governor, and his name was PBS Pinchback, and he was considered mulatto because he had a white father and a black mother. But his story is unique. He was born free in 1837. His mother was free, and of course his father was white, so he was automatically born free in 1837. So he ended up living till 1921, passing away at the age of 84. He was able to accomplish great things during a time of segregation and pre-Civil War. Being born pre-Civil War and living to see part of basically Jim Crow kick in. But during his lifetime, he served as a captain in the Army, in the Union Army, and he helped raise some of the African American units in Louisiana, of Louisianians that joined the Union. But later, went on to become the second African American lieutenant governor of Louisiana behind O.J. Dunn, and then he went on to become the first African American governor of Louisiana, first and also the only to date, as well as one of the first African American governors in the country. So from PBS Pinchback, you can really draw, inspiration of people, strong people who overcame odds. And again, his story can be found in many places, but I first really dived into it in this edition, 1972 edition of the Governors of Louisiana, which again is part of my home library, and I really like it. Um, so the second person, because there's only two, I just wanted to show this difference. Would be well. Before I move on, I'd like to show you a picture of him actually, because I do have a photo of him as well here in the book. So this is him at the top. So that's him, PBS Pinchback. Again, first African American governor of Louisiana. So the second person I'd like to highlight lived during the same period. So PBS Pinchback was born in 1837, and he died in 1921 at the age of 84. My third great grandfather, Abe Maiden, was born in 1830 and died in 1920. So he lived to be 90, but he was born about 6 years or 7 years before PBS Pinchback, and he died the year before. And of course, this is a picture of my third great grandfather. So his story is slightly different. So unlike PBS Pinchback, who was born free, my third great grandfather was actually born a slave, and he remained in that status until the Emancipation Proclamation. But even with that, living basically his first 35 years as a slave, he still was able to accomplish great things. So he went on to become a member of the fraternal organizations. He was a free and accepted Mason. He also was a minister, and he helped establish several churches, some of which are still operational today, including the church I was baptized in actually in 1992, the Galilee Baptist Church of Keithville, Louisiana. There's another church there that came from the Galilee Baptist Church, and then there's a third church that he helped establish in like the Spring Ridge area. I believe it's Macedonia Baptist Church. And the story also goes, according to one of my relatives, Mr. Herman Maiden, whom I spoke with a lot about family history. He also had his own family, a Maiden family church, which was on his property near where he's currently buried, which is on the outskirts of the Veteran Cemetery in Northwest Louisiana. Um, but again, born a slave, died a free man. One of the bigger notable things of his life is that he actually became one of the first, if not the first, African American in Caddo Parish to own his own cotton gin, where he was able to employ other African Americans, to kind of spark that the disparities there sparked the growth of free black people trying to establish themselves. So two unique people, one born free, one born a slave, both African American in Louisiana, born pre-Civil War, living to amass great things well into the 1920s. So the interesting thing with Pinchback, which you see with a lot of the first leaders, whether it be the first black senator in the United States, the first black representative of the United States, or he himself is the first black governor in the United States, they were all Republican. The Republican Party was the African American Party at this time, which we see is quite drastically different today. We see the Democratic Party more as the Republican Party, but it was with Pinchback. Not only was he a governor as a Republican and a lieutenant governor, he was elected to the United States Senate, but it was Democratic senators actually that rose up against him and would not allow him to be seated in the United States Senate. So that's some interesting things to think about when you look at today's political system. Most people would probably stereotype and say that it would be a Republican Senate not wanting to do something of this nature. When you go back to the 1870s, I believe it was 1872 to be exact, he was elected as a senator, and it was the Democratic senators that would not allow him to be seated in the United States Senate. So, an interesting fact about that. So, Louisiana was hard to live in. So my great grandfather stayed there until he passed away. Pinchback ended up leaving in like the 1890s. He actually moved away, and he moved to Washington D.C., where he pretty much lived out his days. So when my third great grandfather passed away in 1920, at the age of 90, in Caddo Parish, Louisiana, Pinchback was 83 and living in Washington D.C., and he ended up dying a year later at the age of 84. But also, if you look on my page, the last thing I posted before this video is a list called Tony's reading list. But it has about, I think, 25 or 30 books, all produced between 1895 till the book I just released this year, 2020. But they all take pieces of the 1870 to they all cover like the 1870 to 1930 time frame. And I would encourage you to look at those because they really give good insight into Reconstruction and just how quickly African Americans were able to actually reestablish themselves and capitalize on their newfound freedoms, before Jim Crow kicked in. So I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that you do get a chance to look at my page and check out the books. Because they're really good books and they give great insight into the history of this country, the struggle of the equality, and it can bring some history and perspective into what we see going on in our nation today. Other than that, there's also a link on my page, of course, to the book that I put out, which has some really good speeches in it, as well as a couple that I republished just for the sake of maintaining that history. They all give insight into African American leaders, what they were thinking and how they were articulating themselves as they struggled to bring the African American race, out of Reconstruction until the 1900s, and to continue that struggle throughout a segregated United States. So you all have a great day, and I do hope that you enjoy today. And if you can, definitely do something to make yourself a little smarter on Juneteenth. Thank you.